Robert Sungenis coming to you once again on the Robert Sungenis live program, this time for August 17th in the year 2022, in the year of our Lord. So glad you could be with us tonight. As you know, this program is set aside for you to ask your questions, give your comments on any topic whatsoever. And my role as host of this program, I will endeavor to answer your questions to the best of my ability using our Catholic faith, the scripture, the tradition, the fathers, the medievals, the Catholic popes, the Catholic saints, the doctors, the theologians, the encyclopedias, the councils, and just about anything I can find to have you walk away satisfied that your question has indeed been answered. We come to you every Wednesday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And usually at the top of the program, I have a topic I want to cover, but not tonight. I do have one question from email that I got today, so I will endeavor to answer that first, and then I'll get right to your questions. And let me see if there's anything else. Well, maybe I should advertise up front our website, which is, let me see, it's not coming up correctly. There we go. robertsongenis.org, and there you will find 30 years of tireless work for the Catholic Church in books and DVDs and even cassette tapes. Believe it or not, we still have some of those left. About once or twice a year, somebody orders them. And we have flash drives and CDs and movies and pamphlets and PDFs and just about every media I can think of to put the good work of our Lord on paper for you. And visit there if you can, either now or a little after the program. And you'll find an assortment of stuff that probably bigger than any website that I have found, that one author is publishing his own books. Not to brag, it's just I cover a lot of topics and try to put it all on paper for you. And may come in hardback, paperback, as I said, PDFs. So we try to accommodate you as much as possible. So take a visit there, and I'm sure there will be something that you like. And for, birthday presents, Christmas presents, I had a lady who ordered a book for her son for his birthday coming up. She got the book, and it doesn't happen often, but every once in a while the book gets mangled in the mail. And she called me desperate to get another book, and we did put that in process for her. So even if your book comes damaged, we take care of that for you. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't happen often, but when it does, we take care of it. Sometimes, and somebody will order two of a item, like another lady ordered two of a DVD that we have, and for some reason we only sent one, and she let us know that she wants the other one too, rightly so. And I said, and we'll give you a free DVD just for the inconvenience. And I always do that in case you don't get exactly what you want. I'll stick something else extra in there for free, just for you. So just to let you know, we love you. Okay. We're not in this just to make money. We are in it to please our patrons as much as possible. So let me see if there's anything else there. No, I think I about did it. So let me go to the first email question I have. There's two of them here. So put on the old glasses. Our new pastor, during the prayers of intercession, had us pray for, quote, the abolishment of the death penalty. I put my head down, understanding the catechism allows for the conditions for monsters to be put to death. What's the latest understanding of the death penalty among liberal Catholics? So I assume your pastor is liberal. I'm trying to read between the lines here. If he's not, then forgive me. Um, yeah, that's one item that has been slowly um, be, been diluted over the years. Um, I think the whole thing started. Well, no, you can't trust a liberal mind. The whole thing started because we're against death, but you know they promote homosexuality, which probably kills more men than you would know from AIDS or monkey virus or whatever it is. Um, and a lot of them are for abortion. So or they look the other way. A good example is our Catholic president, Joe Biden, of course, and his right hand man, Nancy Pelosi. Um, but these same people will, cry, "Whoa, we got to stop the death penalty," because people are being put to death for crimes they may not have committed and all this stuff. So, but that's the liberal mind. You got to understand these people, where they're coming from. These are heart sleeve wearers. Okay, they want everybody to know that they're merciful and compassionate, and they wear their heart on their sleeve. And there's a lot in this game for them to be noticed for, being compassionate. And yet, on the other hand, when it gets down to the real nuts and bolts of life, these are the same people. For example, all the animal lovers out there. Now, I have nothing against animal lovers. We have two dogs, one cat, one fish. So, we have our share of God's creation here. But they love animals, and they have these commercials on TV to take in animals, that have been abandoned, and and all the tree huggers out there, especially the ones that live in California. Of course, I don't know how you wrap your hands around a sequoia tree, but at any rate, um, these are the same people that kill babies in the womb. You know, all the green sleevers out there, Greenpeace, and all these are the same people that vote for abortion. Okay, so I mean, it's just a mishmash of mixed up rationalizations and idealizations that have these people come up with what they come up with. Okay, you never really know what a liberal's going to come up with. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, he could be the most compassionate person. Tuesday and Thursday, he's just hell bent on, killing whatever's in his sight, and he'll rationalize it. And the first item in that line is, of course, human babies in the mother's womb. So, and then you get the conservatives that are a strange bunch, and not that they're wrong, but they have these two polar opposites. Like, these are the hunters, the people with the guns, and they go out hunting and kill animals right and left, and sometimes they eat them. And but it's that whole gun mentality. I mean, I have to have a gun. I have to have a gun in my hand. Happiness is a warm gun, as a song used to say. Warm meaning that's it's just been shot, by the way. Um, and yet, these are the people that are the most vociferous and stalwart against abortion. The conservatives who love the guns and don't mind killing things that get in their way, but not humans. So there's a polarity there, of course, but it's a healthy polarity, and we can all live with that. So, and at least you can predict what a conservative's going to do. Um, uh, I don't know what made me think of Dick Cheney shooting one of his guys in the face, but I guess it's because his daughter Liz Cheney lost her election bid. Aren't we sad about that? Poor Liz. And not only did she lose, she lost by a very wide margin. It's like people said, Liz, not in my house. They got together and defeated what they call the establishment right, who were against the Never Trumpers, who were against Donald Trump. And Liz Cheney was one of them and wanted to convict Donald Trump. I don't know why I'm going off on this, but it made me think of Dick Cheney shooting somebody and getting away with it, by the way. But I just want to bring out that contrast between the liberals and the conservatives. And I did say you can't predict what a liberal's going to do. Usually, you can predict it because they have certain thinking patterns that, and I don't know why this is, but in almost every phase of life, think about it: religion, politics, science, medicine. We just saw that with the COVID thing. Two very polarized sides to that issue. And just about any other category you can think of, the main divide between all of them is conservatives and liberals. And conservatives think a certain way, liberals think a certain way. It's always been uncanny to me that you could pick out a conservative a mile away, you could pick out a liberal a mile away. But the liberals have this, how can I say, they've always been known for this, wearing their heart on their sleeve and protecting life in one sector of life and then the I don't care attitude in another sector of life when it comes to killing. And it's always been puzzling to me. And we pretty much know where the papacy has been the last, 50 years or so. They've all been pretty liberal, okay? And they've all been innovative to a certain extent. And as it goes, they get deeper and deeper into their liberalism, and they want to cover every area they can to make sure that their liberal agenda has given the proper answer to this question, whatever the question may be. And they have put their imprint on society in a very deep way. And as we all know, the area of capital punishment has been one of those. Now, I can see from the development of science, and I'm talking here particularly about DNA evidence, you really have, even if you're conservative, you're going to have to look at this phenomena of DNA evidence exonerating people who have been on death row or people that have already been put on death row. And somehow, some way, they get a good lawyer and they go before the judge and they present the DNA evidence, and at least they'll get a new trial. And 9 times out of 10, that new trial will exonerate them. Now, this has happened, I think, about 250 times since DNA evidence has been developed to this extent in the 1980s. So that's 40 years that we have had 250 people exonerated by DNA evidence. Now, we may all be for the death penalty, but this evidence alone has to make us relook at this issue of the death penalty. We're so proud of our English juridical system that we got. We just took over the English system. of a judge and jury and, you know, innocent till proven guilty and all that stuff. We got it all from England. And it works pretty well, okay, provided that your jury is not only 12 people of your peers, but are educated. And not that you have to be a real smart person to be on a jury. I mean, even somebody with a low IQ can figure out whether somebody's evil or good. It doesn't take much to figure that out. Sometimes they're better at it than the more intelligent people, because the more intelligent people have agendas that they go by, politics and all that. And the more ignorant people are actually immune to things like that that would move them. But at any rate, even if the what we think is the best juridical system, that is a trial by jury of our peers, mistakes are made. Okay, mistakes are made, and when you're going to convict somebody, you have to have 12 in agreement, or it's no dice. And that's if there's a doubt about that person's guilt, um, there should be at least one or two or three people that voice that in the jury room. And, barring that they want to go home and go back to their normal lives and feel under pressure, the right thing to do, of course, is stay there as long as you have to get to the right decision. But, this is part of life, is that you can think you are 100% certain of something. And I'm not talking about, whether the sky's blue or black, okay? Those things are common sense. I'm talking about the things that you have data, and then you have to put all the data together and connect the dots correctly and figure out what the answer is, okay? And sometimes in those areas where you have to do some calculation, you may be wrong. And believe me, many, many mistakes have been made when the experts have put their brains to work to try to figure out what the answer is. And bridges collapse, and buildings collapse, and things explode that weren't supposed to explode, and all kinds of things happen in this world. So, we live in a world sometimes where we're not certain of what the truth is. And I can see that as an impetus for people to rethink the death penalty issue. Okay. Not necessarily to change it, because that's going to take some doing, I think. But I can see the trend of thought in that direction. As I said, just because of the DNA evidence. Because the last thing you want to do is convict an innocent person and put them to death. I mean, think about that. Okay. At least the criminal who is convicted of first degree murder and goes to prison for the rest of their lives, and hopefully that is the alternate punishment to death. Not going into prison for 10 years and then getting out, which is ridiculous, of course. But liberal judges do that too. Well, there was just a story today about a man in New York City who has been brought before the judge 41 times for assault and battery on citizens on New York streets. And the last one, he cold cocked a Asian woman walking the other way with his fist and knocked her out. And they found out that this guy has been arrested and convicted 41 times and let out 41 times. So, you're always going to get some of these crazy judges. There's really not a lot you can do about it except vote them out of office. But, they're going to be in there for a while before you can vote them out, if you can vote them out. But but at least they first degree murder convictions end up with a life sentence usually. And if it's particularly nasty, then it might be without parole. And at least we know that that's going to happen. If they're not put to death, at least we know that they're going to be have a miserable life the rest of their lives for, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And, some people think that that's worse than being put to death, because now you're going to have to suffer in a cell and be victimized by all the people in the prison, um, and have that for the rest of your life. That's pretty, you know, I think I would rather die than have that. So it's not like they're not going to get punished. Like, if we have objections to capital punishment, some people think, well, they're going to be let free. No, not usually. Okay, there you may have a couple of exceptions to that rule, but not usually. So well, at least we know that. Okay, so and I make fun of the Greenpeacers and all those kinds of people, the tree huggers and all that, but they have done their part too. Because if the corporations and let's say the corporations, these are the rich people of society. Um, um, they live in a world that sometimes they're Democrats, sometimes they're Republican. You can, it's really a toss up there. But they don't care, as long as they make their money and please their stockholders, they wouldn't care whether they ruin the environment, you know? I mean, you really have to, and the drug companies too. If there weren't strictures put on the drug companies, these guys are making more money than you could ever imagine by putting a new pill out there every, month or so, and with side effects that are so deleterious to the human body that you wonder how it gets past the CDC or whoever is in charge of, making sure everything is kosher. Um, they do this, they make money, and that's all they care about. And if they could have their druthers, they would put dangerous products on the market and on your store grocery shelf because they're in it to make money. So it's good that we have people like, the Greenpeacers and all those other organizations that stop these guys by some pretty hefty maneuvers, either directly or politically. They have learned how to play the game and put a stop to them. So you have excesses and extremes on both sides of the fence. And I think it all works out together that we can still live here. And I can still come on this program after I've had, something to eat, and took a little nap before I came, and everything's hunky dory here in Greencastle, Pennsylvania. Why is that? Well, somehow things always balance out, and we happen to be able to live without having a catastrophe every single day. Because that's what would happen if we didn't have normal and normal checks and balances in society. And are looking at the death penalty again. When God gave the law in Genesis 6 that, if you take man's life, then your life will be taken. That was given very early on in human history. And it's not that is thrown out. It's just that we better be darn sure that if we're given the responsibility to obey that command, we better be sure that the person did indeed kill somebody. And as with, premeditation, it wasn't an accident. And if we're not sure, then God's going to hold us responsible. See, this commandment that God gave goes two ways. If you're not sure, or you convict somebody who's innocent, then the responsibility is on you as the authority. And that's not a place you want to be. As a matter of fact, what they should have is if you wrongly convict someone, there should be some punishment for those who do that. And then I think we would take our judicial system a lot more seriously than we do, than just 12 angry men inside a jury room trying to get home to see their wives and kids, and you know may not give a hoot about the person they convict because they don't know them. So as good as we think our juridical system is, sometimes even the judge will throw out an opinion by the jury. I believe in most states he has the power to do that because, these are people who, what, maybe once in their life they sit on a jury and they don't know all the ins and outs of the legal system. They don't know the tricks that lawyers use. They don't know that somebody crying on the witness stand is necessarily sincere and innocent, but maybe putting on an act. I mean, that may cross their minds, but all these things take place in a courtroom, um, and that's why we have um, good lawyers, bad lawyers, and mediocre lawyers. And sometimes whether you get off or not is whether you have a good lawyer who can find a loophole in the law. And they believe this is their job. Their job is not to search for justice. Their job is to make sure their client gets exonerated. That's why they're paid. They're not paid by the court to bring justice. I mean, that may be part of their whole repertoire to be just, or they may say it is, because who wants to be accused of just working for your client to get them off? Nobody. All the lawyers want to be held up as, stalwarts of justice. But the truth of the matter is, the good lawyers are the ones that, yeah, they can find the loopholes or they can cajole the jury. And, that's why we have jury selection wherein both the prosecutor and the defending attorney have to decide what jurors they want. So it's not a pure system where you can pick the first 12 people in line and say, hey, you guys are going to be jurors, and expect them to do the right thing. And that's not the way it works either. Okay, they have to be chosen to be on a jury. And if the lawyer thinks that there's the slightest possibility you have a prejudice, you're not going to be on the jury. Okay, and so look at all the machinations that go on in a court of law to you know give some semblance of justice, and yet we know there's a lot of hokey pokey going on. Okay, so we know our judicial system isn't perfect. It's the best we have, and that's what God gave us. So we're going to have to do the best we can, and we're going to have to admit as human beings that we can make mistakes. And I think, or let's put it this way, if that is the motive for those who are questioning the death penalty, I can reason with that. Okay. But if the reason is, as I suspect among many, that it's just wrong to kill people, that's not a good enough reason. Okay. I mean, let me say that a little bit better. If you think it's wrong that when you convict someone of murder in the first degree, that it would be wrong in any case to kill them as a punishment for their crime, that's not going to fly. And even if Pope Francis wants to or has changed it to that, somebody else can come along and, put it back to normal. Okay. That can be it. So far, I think Francis has been, um, even for a liberal of his color, who probably deep in his heart, thinks it is wrong to um, execute someone for first degree murder. I think he is astute enough to know that the whole history of the church is to be in consideration when he makes his final decision. Um, and if and when that comes down to a case of Catholic doctrine, not something that's just in the catechism, um, that I think he will take into consideration. Okay. Um, some people might believe that putting a restriction on capital punishment in the catechism is another trial balloon, see what kind of reaction he's going to get. Although it's a strong reaction from him, to put it in the catechism, that's not Catholic dogma. Okay. So at least we have that room between the catechism and dogma where this thing can still be adjudicated by hopefully more astute minds than Pope Francis if this needs to be addressed again in the future. So, okay. So I don't know why I spent 35 minutes on that one, but sorry about that. All right. Let me try to do this next one quicker. He says, I, as a former seminarian with 1 year studying with the FSSP, left and went back to my diocese as I was negatively affected by the quote unquote spiritual arrogance among their faithful today. I have many non Christian and even non religious friends, and spiritual practices come up, one being astrology. I have to acknowledge, with pretty solid philosophy training, these signs seem to designate personalities pretty well. A woman who I have become friends with seemed to be able to label me pretty well as an apparent Aquarius. If she is she demonically influenced or is astrology wholly demonic? Well, you know, there's always been a fascination with astrology. Let me just say point blank, it's not of God. Okay. I'm not too sure it's of the devil in the sense of being demonic because the devil doesn't use it, as far as I know. Um, it is used of people who want to have some authority to back up their delving into human personalities and seeing certain patterns. Okay. Now, psychologists do this, psychiatrists do it, even your average everyday counselor knows that there are certain personalities and there's certain patterns in these personalities. Most of these people who know something about the mind will tell you there's four basic personalities. And then as you read further in the literature, you'll find that there's four subcategories of each of those personalities. So now you have 16. Okay. And then there sometimes are even more subcategories to the 16. Not often, but you will see that at times. Just go on the YouTube and see the psychologists talking. They all follow these patterns in judging human behavior, human personality. Okay. So we know there's quite a variety out there, but what we also know from this variety is there's quite a bit of overlap. Okay. Now, my wife is into um, categorizing personalities. She's always talking about it, and she's pretty good at it, actually. And now she's following someone with, you're a JSTH or you're a, DCEF or whatever it is. I even forget what the major title is to the psychology. But people can be categorized with these, and she'll come across somebody and she'll say, he's a JEPD or a, whatever. And I just go, I just don't buy into it. Why? Is because um, I just know the human mind is a very complicated thing, and there's just too much overlap between personalities to start categorizing people as you're this, you're red, you're blue, you're green, you're yellow. Um, because as soon as you do that, something's going to happen that's going to upset your little theory. And you're going to find that in Johnny over here, there's a mixture of red and blue and yellow and green and sometimes purple and turquoise. And for Mary, she may have more red than green and less blue than green, but she's got a mixture, and so on for everyone. Okay. So with astrology, look, you're going to hit on a lot of those personality characteristics in Johnny or Mary or Susie, because each of us has at least a little bit of those personalities inside of us. The thing that distinguishes us is that the red part of my personality may be a lot stronger. I may be 80% red, and Mary is, 60% red, but we both have red. Okay. Now I'm using red just as a label for a distinctive personality. Okay. And then, Mary's 60 red, and she may be 10% blue and 15% green and 1%, periwinkle. And you just never know. Okay. But look, that's what astrology is working on. You can name, if you read the daily horoscope, it'll mention, let's say, 6 personality characteristics of an Aquarius or a Taurus or this or that. I can tell you this, at least 3 or 4 of them are going to agree with the fact that at least 3 or 4 of them are going to be what you have in your personality. Okay. And what do we do when we look at it? We go, oh, wow, look at that. Look at all the things they got right about this personality. Never mind the things they got wrong. Well, we just ignore those. Okay. And you can get another person to put them in there, and they'll get 3 or 4 out of 6 correct. Okay. And what do? Well, wow, look how accurate that is. Okay. You can go through every one of the zodiac signs, all 12 of them, and you're going to find at least 30 to 40 to 50% of your personality in each one of them. Not maybe the dominant personality of you, but the inferior personality of you, the one that hides inside of you, or the one that comes out every once in a while when you're pressured or when you're excited or this or that, or happens when you're listening to music or reading a book or whatever. The one percenters personality, that's periwinkle, might come out one day, and that's you. Okay. So You are a complicated mixture of personality traits that are common to everybody. And again, some of us have more dominant personality traits, some inferior, some in the middle of the road. Okay. But we're all going to have something very similar. But this is where they get you. Okay. They try to categorize them in such a way where we're going to call these major characteristics in Aquarius and try to make it sound like that's you have to measure up to them instead of them measuring up to you. Okay. And so that's why it can be dangerous because people, you get this into the wrong hands. And you get people who are not godly, they're not Christians. And life is some bizarre trip they're going through that they just can't figure out. And from one day to the next, they're filled with fear about what may happen to them. They don't even know why they're here in the first place. They live day to day, groping, hoping they'll find an answer, never finding it. Everything just is normal all the time in the sense that, there's no signs of God here or there in their lives. And they're looking for answers. They're looking for something greater than themselves as a guide because they know they can't do it. Okay. If you haven't reached that point in your life, you may. Okay. And Christians already have an answer to that. God is the superior entity in their life that guides them. And they have something they can look to that's greater than them that they can find answers to. But most of the people in the world don't. And what better thing to look at as the greater thing in your life than the stars? Okay. I mean, those little lights far, far away. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. It's like they're above us. And wow, wouldn't it be nice if just we could figure out those patterns the stars are communicating to us and have a guide to our life? Yeah. Well, see, the devil knows that too. And so do people who want to use and abuse you. They know that's what you're looking for. Okay. And it's just like people that get hypnotized. You can't get hypnotized unless you want to get hypnotized. And those are the kind of people they look for too, the gullible people. Usually, the way it works out is at least 1/3 of the society is gullible. You can tell them anything and they're going to believe you. Okay. The other 2/3 have figured out that this world is not paradise, and there's going to be people out there that are going to use and abuse you and try to trip you up. But you can always count on at least 1/3. It doesn't mean that 2/3 are immune to being deceived. It just means that automatically you're going to get 1/3 of the society that you can deceive. Okay. And the other 2/3 you need to work on. And this is one way to work on them, using something like astrology. And this is why the Bible condemns it, the church condemns it, the fathers have condemned it. Everybody's condemned astrology. Okay. Galileo used to be an astrologer before he became an astronomer, and he used to make tons of money off of it. Anyway, that's another subject. But I hope I've answered your question. Okay. So, all right. So let's go to our chat room here and see who's chatting. Question. John Smith says, If you were Pope, what is the number one thing you would change or fix? Oh, I hate these questions because, once you narrow it down to one, that means you've forgotten all the others, or the others aren't important. And I don't want to be in that position. I think everything's important. Um, but I guess, I mean, if I have to answer it, I would say this. It's like it says in the Proverbs, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. Um, and as the more I live, the longer I live, the more true I see that. Because if you don't have a strong sense of God's presence right here in this very room, you don't have the fear of God in you. And without the fear of God, you have no buffers around you. You have no constraints. You can go here and there and everywhere in your thinking, and nobody's going to be there with a whip stopping you. And that's what's dangerous about men. I mean, if men don't have the fear of God in them, and you can think of stories about men who've come to the doors of the Vatican and were ready to break them down and ransack the Vatican. And this has happened 2 or 3, 4 times in history where suddenly the fear of God hit them and they turned around and went home. Okay. And then, of course, there's other men, whether it's, Adolf Hitler or Genghis Khan or Mao Zedong or Pol Pot or whoever it is, who just don't have the fear of God. They fear neither God nor man, and they do whatever they want. Okay. And it happens in the church too. Priests today in the seminaries are not taught about the fear of God. God is becoming a very distant, like deist God in our seminaries today. A God who sort of wound it up, went away, and never came back. And now we're on our own. And we can make our own rules, basically, because we've got a grasp of knowledge unlike anyone has ever had before. I mean, who can make telescopes like the new James Webb telescope and look out to the far reaches of space like we can? Nobody in the whatever thousands of years you think we've been here has even come close to that. They didn't even know there were galaxies up until the 1930s. And then only in America and a couple of other countries, maybe Russia or France, England. I mean, the majority of our human history. But now today, we can make drugs and we've got cell phones and jet planes and I could sit here for an hour and list the things that we have that we figured out with our own human intellect. And not all of them are good, of course, but we have them. Okay. And this just shows that we are a lot different than, even 100 years ago or 200 years ago. So in that sense, we think that, and they've dissected the Bible now, and they think Moses never wrote the Pentateuch. It was written by some Jew who came out of Babylonian captivity, and we've basically undermined all of the Bible, and we've just said all those stories about Jonah and Noah's flood, and all that's just fiction, and our human writers write like that, and um, you know, um, the Bible's just a book of stories and moral teachings written by people long ago who really have no concern of us anymore. And um, so we really think we're hotsy totsy, you know? And this kind of mentality, um, it takes the fear of God away from you because all the men prior to us who didn't have our technology could figure things out and dissect the Bible like they do today and just put it on the shelf. Those men had the fear of God. Everybody had the fear of God. And they lived by it. Now, some of them, you know, became possessed by the devil, or they decided, I'm going to take my chances with God or whatever. Yeah, there's always that kind of people back then. But I'm just talking about today. There's many, many, many more of them than there were before. Um, so this kind of society that we have now, as I said, takes the fear of God out of the men because now they think they can pull themselves by their own bootstraps and don't need God. And as a matter of fact, God wasn't the one who brought us here. We were brought here by a multiverse or an infinite universe, and we can show you in physics that these quantum fluctuations can make a whole universe and do it, over and over and over again from infinity onward. And there's we don't even believe in the deist God anymore. Okay, the whole world is tending toward atheism, and so that's what I think would change. You have to start with the bottom line, the basics. And if men don't have the fear of God, then it's hopeless. It's hopeless. Our whole gospel depends on men having the fear of God, knowing that there are two choices. There's not three or four. There's no neutrality. You've got two choices. You're either going to go with God or you're going to go with the devil. And that's it. And they need to know that if they don't choose God, even if they don't want to, even if they find it hard to do, at least do it because the fear of God that's in you tells you he's going to judge you. And it's not going to be, slap on the wrist. Okay. That has to be instilled in men. That's why the gospel works. It's why I even bother to do this every day, because I'm hoping the fear of God is still in men. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Have you ever seen the documentary Citizen 4 and or the film Snowden? If not, I highly recommend it. Thank you, by the way. God bless you. That's from Batman Incorporated. Citizen 4, no. Snowden. No. What do I know about Snowden? He's the Snowden. Is he the guy that spilled the beans on the U.S. secrets or something? I'll look these up, by the way. And Citizen 4. Okay. All right. I'll look them up and I'll report back to you, Batman. Let you know what I think. Okay. All right. Okay. Question: during the Fever SSPX show, you implied you were critical of Saint Faustina What were you referring to? Only strange thing I've heard was the planet God offered to send her to. Well, Turtle, you just reinforced my hesitation about Sister Faustina. Look, I just want to let you know up front, I have nothing personal against Sister Faustina. Okay. All I know is there's been some controversy about her authenticity from John Paul II, and the people around him. Um, and to be very honest, I don't know a whole heck of a lot about it. Okay. All I know is I am not going to go near it unless I feel 100% confident that she is legit, authentic, and won't lead me astray. And I do that with anybody. You could put Saint so and so in place of Saint Sister Faustina, and I'd have the same reaction. Okay, I am not one to trying to catch a gnat here. It's been bothering me all night. I am not one to run to the um, I don't know, how would I call it? I'm not one to run. I will walk, but not run to any person who displays extraordinary gifts or teachings or knows a lot of people or this or that. I am very cautious about that. Okay, and I got him. He's dead. That's what I get for leaving my window open. All right. Because see, my faith is not built on those extraordinary things. I'll take what God gives me as long as I know it's legitimate, authentic. But I'm not going to go searching for it. Okay, because I have just seen too many horror stories of people pretending to be such and such or thinking they are. Maybe they're innocent as far as doing anything evil, but they think that God's chosen them. They think that God has given them visions and dreams and allocutions and this and that. Okay. They come by the truckload. And all you need to do is examine a few of them and you begin to see, oh my gosh, this person, whether they're being evil or not, they're making it up. Okay. They're making it up in their own mind. And that's easy to do. Okay. It's easy to do. One of the greatest temptations we have as men and women is to think we're something special and that God's communicating with us and that we have a responsibility to communicate that to others. And when I say communicate, I mean communicate directly, like come into your mind somehow. Okay. I know for a fact that that does not happen very often. And when it does, the church will approve it and we can be satisfied, at least as far as that goes, not to be deceived by it. Okay. But when there's a controversy about someone like that, I feel the same way about Anne Catherine Emmerich. Okay. Some of the things that she has said are so bizarre that I just know she's making it up. Okay. That's my opinion. And I have the right to that opinion. I do not go after what Anne Catherine Emmerich says about anything. And there's a lot of other, and a lot of them are women, by the way. Okay. I don't know where they all come from, but there's just a lot of them I just am very skeptical about. And I've read them and I'm just not a fan. Okay. So it's not like I'm trying to pick on Sister Faustina. Okay. I'm just that way about everybody. I've lived too long and been through too many bad experiences to let down my guard, so to speak, and um, accept everybody that comes along and, that has a message. So, um, but no hard feelings. Okay. I'm just trying to do the right thing. Okay. All right. Question. Is the curse the Jews placed on themselves in the gospel still ongoing? Let his blood be upon us, on our heads and our children. Or was it just for that generation? Thank you so much. Okay, so this needs to be taken apart, put back together, because there's a lot of conflicting ideas here. Okay, first of all, in Matthew 27, when the woman from the crowd shouted out, "Let his blood be upon us and our children," that was her. Okay, she wasn't a prophetess. She was saying what the majority of the Jews felt, not all of them. And as they were led in that direction by the chief priests, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, everybody was in on it. She just blurted this out. Okay, but it's not a prophecy, and it's not like God inspired her to say to Jesus, "Let his blood be upon us and our children," as if that had now to be fulfilled. Okay, now it is true, of course, that as she said that, the judgment of God did come upon the Jews. Okay, so in that sense, her statement, her own statement, coincided with what the future held for the Jews. But that doesn't mean that she was prophesying and that this is something God had to fulfill because this woman prophesied. Okay. This woman is just stating her own opinion. But it's important that we know what she said because she's basically speaking the same thing everybody else is thinking. Okay. We don't care about this Jesus guy. Okay. And people used to talk that way all the time. If I'm wrong, God damn me. We say that even today. People out of frustration or whether. So that's what was going on in that situation. Okay. Now, as far as the Jews being judged, look, this was prophesied in the Old Testament. I don't know how many times by how many different prophets that God was going to judge the Jews for rejecting him. Okay. And he had done it twice before in a major way, first with the 10 tribes in the north, who were sent off into Assyrian captivity. I'm trying to get the net again. In 722 BC. And then there were 2 tribes left. Okay. So obviously God's judging them, right? Because there's only 2 tribes left. And they go bad. And so they're taken into Babylonian captivity in 587 BC. And they're there for 70 years. And then God allows them to come back to start over again. But look, these people are not the same. They're lucky they're surviving. Okay. And they come back around 458 BC under Cyrus, okay, the Persian king. They're not strong enough to come back by themselves. So God, has a history of judging the Jews for their sins. And the same thing is prophesied about the time when Jesus came, that God was going to judge the Jews, the majority of them, and only a remnant would remain faithful. And that's what we have today. Okay. There's 14 million Jews in the world, and there's a couple thousand that have not bowed the knee to Baal. as Paul says in Romans 11. Okay? You have the same remnant that you had 2,000 years ago. As a matter of fact, they had a remnant of faithful Jews in the time of David and Solomon and all the kings of Israel. There was always a remnant of faithful Jews. Thank God for that. But the majority of them just blew God off. And talk about no fear of God. Oh my gosh. So it's not something out of the ordinary that God would judge the Jews in the time of Jesus. Okay, this was prophesied long ago, and they never changed their stance. The majority of them. Okay, and it's going to be like this until Jesus comes back the second time. There's only going to be a remnant of Jews who are faithful and accept Jesus Christ as the Savior. That's it. Okay. And that's Paul's message in Romans chapter 11. There's not going to be some mass conversion of Jews. This is a totally fallacious idea that was started a long time ago by some people who did not know how to exegete scripture correctly. And it stuck and spread itself. And many eschatologies today are based on this idea that there's going to be some mass conversion of Jews before Jesus comes back. I can tell you that is not true. There's not 1 ounce of it that is true. Okay. In that sense, the judgment was given at the cross and the judgment remains. Okay. The same is true of the Gentiles. There's not going to be some mass of Gentiles that are going, there's going to be a remnant of Gentiles also. Okay. Proportionally, there's going to be, well, not proportionally, arithmetically, there's going to be more Gentiles because they outnumber the Jews 500 to 1. Okay. So you're going to have a larger population of Gentiles that become Christian, but proportionally, there's still going to be a remnant. Okay. And that's the way the gospel has been working ever since it was started, back in the time of Cain and Abel. So I hope I've answered your question. Question regarding women head covering during Mass. Does any head covering suffice? While the veil is traditional, what about other head coverings such as hats, scarves, etc.? Yeah, the church doesn't get into that. It just says women should have something that resembles a covering on their head. I mean, sometimes when my daughters forget to bring their veil, and they all wear veils at even the Novus Ordo Mass, they'll put on a little hairpiece and that'll suffice. Okay. Now I don't want them to practice that, but in case they don't have their veil, okay, so you use something else. I remember when I was growing up as a Catholic in first grade, we used to go to Mass during Lent. Every day we went to Mass during Lent. And, a lot of the girls forgot their veils. And so they put a Kleenex, a tissue on their head. So, and that sufficed. God's not going to be some ogre looking at, where's your veil? Get that veil on, or else I'm going to, send you to fire. He's just not that kind of God. Okay. So, so I hope I've answered your question. Okay. So next question comes from Joe Ennis. When Jesus said to Martha, wait a minute, there's no question here. Oh, there is a question. But Joe, you forgot to put the word question in front. All right. When Jesus said to Martha, I am the resurrection and the life, was he the resurrection from all eternity or at his incarnation? He had not yet died and resurrected. Okay. Well, in John 11, where this is occurring, Jesus is just about to go to Jerusalem to die on the cross. Okay. So it's not like he's saying this 3 years before he's going to the cross. It's like in that week he's going to Jerusalem. Okay. So, and Jesus sometimes talked this way. I am the resurrection. He's referring to his resurrection from the dead on Easter Sunday. Okay. Now, the reason Jesus says this to, and it's actually Mary he says this to, not Martha. Mary says, because Lazarus has just died, okay? And she says, if you had been here, you wouldn't have died. And Jesus says, do you believe in, I forget exactly what his words are. Do you believe in the resurrection? And Mary says, yes, I believe in the resurrection of the last day. Okay. And that's pretty significant because, first of all, it shows Mary's pretty theologically astute because she knows about this resurrection of the last day. And that word last day, eschatos hemeros, is used only 6 times in the New Testament. And one of them is here in John 11. And that's pointing to the last day of the bodily resurrection. Okay. So, in other words, when Jesus says, do you believe in the resurrection? Mary's saying, yes, I believe it, but that's going to be way in the future. I won't see my brother Lazarus until, a long time from now. And Jesus says, yes, that's correct. There is a resurrection of the last day, but I am the resurrection. Okay, now Jesus wants to get her mind off of the future. Not that she's wrong, but that, okay, there's going to be something before the resurrection of the last day, before that bodily resurrection. Okay. That's the resurrection of your soul, basically. This is what happens to us when we're baptized. Our soul is resurrected from being dead. Now it's alive. Okay. And the New Testament uses that kind of language, figurative language, for baptism all the time. So Jesus wants to educate Mary, basically, and let her know that it's not just some power in the future. This is a power that is existing now. And he does this by saying, I am the resurrection and the life. Okay. So now what? Okay. Well, we know now what, because the rest of the story is talking about Jesus going to the tomb and saying, Lazarus, come forth. And here's a man who's been dead for 4 days, comes walking out saying, what's going on? And, probably thinks he's been asleep and then, wakes up, but then he finds he's got grave cloths on and he's in a tomb. And so, yeah, this is much bigger than Lazarus. Can't even imagine. But there was Mary's answer. Okay, Mary, I am the resurrection. Not only will I rise from the dead, I can raise anybody I want to rise from the dead, even now. Okay. And because Jesus was close to these people, and even he himself, the only time it says Jesus wept is in John 11 when his great friend Lazarus died. So he must have been very close to him. Raises him from the dead, and that proves Jesus is the resurrection. So he fulfilled his words to Mary. And then, of course, he's going to Jerusalem, where he himself will die, and he will rise from the dead. So, Mary, it's not something just in the future, the last day. It's going on right now. And most of the time it's going to happen spiritually with our souls that are going to be raised from the dead. And sometimes, as long as I'm here, it's going to happen physically. Okay? And we know of all the stories in the New Testament where Jesus raised people from the dead. So again, he's the resurrection. He's where it comes from, you see. So again, that was proven before Mary and during the visit with Mary, that Jesus was the resurrection. All right, let's move on here. If the sun was made on the fourth day, how do we have night and day, morning and evening, since the first day itself in verse 5? Well, good question, Charlie. Charlie Frost Charlie. Remember the light that was created on the first day? It says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Well, yeah, there was a big light made. Okay. And we're going to cover this in our new movie that's coming out. And we should have the first day out probably in a couple of months. But it'll be all in pictures for you. So you'll be able to see it and just as if you were there watching it. Isn't that going to be exciting? But yes, there was a big light there, much bigger than our sun would ever be. Okay. Many, many billions of times, well, not billions, let's say at least 10,000 times the size of our sun, and probably even more. You know, could be up to 1,000,000 times larger than our sun, was this light on the first day. And this light, just like the sun would be doing on the fourth day, is going around this earth. Now, the earth is enveloped by water, okay? And there's a lot of water there. And the light is going around this water with the earth in the middle, and it's doing it in 24 hours. And on the first day, first 12 hours of the first day, everything is in darkness. So let's say both hemispheres, Eastern Hemisphere, Western Hemisphere, they're in darkness, both of them, for the first 12 hours of the first day. And we know we've got 24 hours, so we've got 12 hours left. So on the 12th hour, God creates the light. You know, God said, let there be light, and there was light. And so this massive light is created. And I'm not going to get into the substance of the light right now. We do that in our movie later. And it starts out on, let's say, the meridian line is the beginning of the Eastern Hemisphere. And so this light goes around the Eastern Hemisphere for 12 hours, okay, of the second 12 hours of the first day. And so once it reaches the end of the Eastern Hemisphere and has been giving it light from hours 12 to 24, then we have the end of the first day. So you can say, and there was evening and morning the first day. When was the evening? That started from hours 1 to 12. When was the morning? That came after the evening, because in Hebrew culture, the evening started the day, not the morning. So 6 p.m. was the beginning of the day. Okay. And 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., okay, was the first 12 hours. And everything was dark in the first 12 hours. And then you have the light being created on the 12th hour, which is 6 a.m. in the Eastern Hemisphere. And the sun moves around that Eastern Hemisphere and lights up the whole Eastern Hemisphere from hours 12 to 24. And you have your one day. Okay. All right. And there's something else that happens on the second day and the third day. And then by the time the sun is made on the fourth day, well, it's made because we don't need this big light anymore. Okay. This light that it could be a million times bigger than the sun. We don't need it anymore because it did its job in the first part of the creation week, days 1 to 3.5, basically, and then it dissipates into the heavens. We can still see it today. We can still see that light. Okay, astronomers have seen it, and that will be in the movie also. Okay, we have two sources that report seeing this light, and the way they say it is we've taken out all the light from the stars, the galaxies, the quasars, the this, the that, whatever's out there, and we still have 50% of the light left in the universe. Well, where's that coming from? Yeah, well, this light that God made dissipated and it's still out there. Okay, because he's not going to destroy it after he created, of course. Okay, but we don't need that light because it had a big job to do because all of the water was ice. See, before the light came, the temperature was 0 and it was all ice that was covering the earth. So the light was needed and it needed to be big in order to melt all this ice. Once it did that, then it could start to dissipate out into the heavens until it was not finally needed anymore on the fourth day and the sun and stars took over. Okay, so this will all be explained out in our movie, and I think you'll enjoy it very much. All right. Question: any modern prophet of our time that you know that made right prophecy? Who and what? Well, I would put at the top of the list would be the three seers of Fatima. Okay, Sister Lucia being the more prominent one of the three. Yeah, I would definitely put my rubber stamp on her, and that's only because the church has done that. And yeah, there's not one thing that I have found that Sister Lucia said that I'm skeptical of, have a hard time believing, or think that she was just some fanatical nut. Okay. So that would be one. Okay. Sister Saint Bernadette would be another one. I have a little trouble with Melanie and her little family there. But I'm sure that something that she said was authentic. And the church herself has had problems with Melanie coming from La Salette. I do not take any stock in Garabandel. I think the messages coming from Akita in Ecuador are probably legit. But let's put it this way. The ones that I would feel comfortable with and accept totally are few and far between. Okay. All right. Oscar says, hello, Robert. Question: how would a geocentric universe give a better explanation to account for what they call stellar aberration? What are the advantages of the geocentric model? The advantages are that the geocentric model is not hampered by a limited speed of light, number one. Okay, and current scientists who believe in heliocentrism have had a real tough go trying to explain stellar aberration. Because if you go by Einstein's limited speed of light at c, you're going to have a tough time. Okay. The geocentric model, because it allows the universe to rotate, is not going to have a limited speed of light. because now you have an accelerated frame. And in an accelerated frame, you have light, gravity, and material objects that can all exceed the speed of c. Okay. So you're going to have a one-to-one correspondence with whatever you see happening in the sky, and that for stellar aberration, that would be the star over a year's period is going to trace out an oval, some eccentricity of an oval it's going to have, except at the north celestial pole where it's going to be a circle. And since there's a one-to-one correspondence with the light coming from the star and reaching Earth that we don't have to worry about in the geocentric system, okay? And we know that the universe is precessing both vertically and horizontally so that it forms a spiral around the Earth as the center of mass. The whole universe does. It's spiraling around the Earth. What's it going to draw in the sky? It's going to draw an oval. Okay. And since the horizontal shape of the eccentricity of the oval is going to be 186 million miles, because it's using the ecliptic between the Earth and the Sun, and the vertical oscillation or precession is going to be about 75 million miles. Well, that means that the horizontal is about twice as large as the vertical. And what's that going to make? It's going to make an oval. If you look at that star at 45-degree angle, you're going to see an oval where the major axis is twice as long as the minor axis. Okay, so if there's anything that we've got on them, it's stellar aberration. Okay, I mean, but there's many other things we have on them, but we certainly have answered stellar aberration and they're still having problems. There's about 4 different explanations the heliocentrists have for stellar aberration, and none of them really work. So anyway, all right, next question. These are question. Talking to skeptics and through logic, does someone have to believe creation before they believe geocentrism? Believe creation? Well, you've got to believe that God called these bodies into existence. Okay, so you can't be discussing which body's going around which body before you believe that the bodies actually exist, if that's what you mean. I mean, that's just common sense. Okay. But what we're doing in our movie, in case you're interested, Gavin, is we're showing how an ex nihilo creation can coordinate with a geocentric universe. Okay. That is, when God called the earth and the water into being first, and then called the light on the first day, and then he calls forth the firmament. And then now Genesis 1 doesn't tell us, but then it says in 10 other passages of the Old Testament that God spread out the heavens. So now we know the firmament's being spread out. So we take that as the next event. And then God will expand the earth and move up the land masses, and the water is going to fall into the basins. And then on the second half of the third day, he's going to make the plant life, the trees and everything. And then he makes the sun and stars, moon on the fourth day. Well, we can show that this sequence of events was chosen by God because it fits in with a geocentric universe. Okay. And if you don't start with the idea that the universe is geocentric, then you're never going to be able to understand how those days fit chronologically because they're all going to seem backward. And that's why people have had so much confusion with the days of Genesis because they're all starting from a heliocentric frame. And if you do that, nothing's going to fit. You're going to be scratching your head wondering why is this sequence the way it is? Earth, water, light, firmament, plants, celestial bodies, animals, or fish and birds, and then animals and man. Now we can understand the last 2 days, fish and birds, animals and man, but it's those first 4 days that can only be coordinated under the guise of a geocentric universe. And we're going to show you how that's done in the movie. So we're all excited about it. I hope you are too, because this will be the first of its kind ever given to mankind. I say that as confidently as I can. Okay, I know it's might be a stretch to some people, but nothing like this has ever been done before. Okay, especially as graphic as we're doing it. And believe me, I've studied all of the hundreds of books from the fathers, the medievals, and everybody in between and after. And I can tell you that we have basically tied them all together, all the best ideas of all of them. We've tied them all together to make this understanding of the creation days. All right, let me move on here. Does someone have to, okay. Who do you believe is the most significant saint of the 20th century? I think Sister Lucia is well, she's not a saint yet, of course, but in my book, she is. I think she's the most significant person of the 20th century, at least the early part of the 20th century. That's where I'll have to leave it. I mean, Padre Pio probably is up there too, but I'll leave it at that. Can you explain the general judgment after death and the particular judgment at the second coming? Well, you've got them backwards. It's the particular judgment at your death, and it's the general judgment particular judgment at your death, and the general judgment at the end of the world. Okay. So the reason you have a particular judgment is because God has to know where to put you, basically. And you're either going to go to one of three places: heaven, hell, or purgatory. Okay. So, and then you will wait there if you're in purgatory until God releases you to heaven, or you'll wait there if it's required to wait there until the end of time. Okay. And if you're in hell, you're going to be waiting for the general judgment in the sense that you will get a body that will be coordinated and correlated with everything that you're going to experience in hell. Okay. If you go to heaven, then you're going to receive a new body, an incorruptible body that will last for eternity, that will be much better than the one you have now. much more glorious, and probably resemble what Jesus experienced on the Mount of Transfiguration as our closest comparison to what our new bodies are going to be like. And you will have that body, and it will be united with your soul when your soul leaves this earth on the last day, if you happen to last to the last day. And if you don't die here on earth, then you will be transformed into your new body in the twinkling of an eye, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15. So fast you won't even notice it. And then you will meet with the Lord in the air, and you will take place. You will participate in the judgment of the evil angels and the evil people of the world, and you will be sending them to their eternal destiny at that time. And so I hope I've explained it to you. Okay. Question. A TLM priest once told me at one time it was a mortal sin for him to intentionally veer from prescribed liturgical norms. Is there anything like that in canon law today? Any consequences? Yes. Priests are held very rigidly to the things that they have to do, especially when they're saying mass. Okay. So yes, that is in canon law. I can't tell you exactly what the canon is, but I know that is in canon law. And if the bishop ever finds out that he's intentionally doing things other than what are prescribed liturgical norms, he will not be a priest for very long, or he will be disciplined, or something will happen. Okay. So, all right, question. What do you, from Una, what do you think of the luminous mysteries of the Rosary? I have nothing against the luminous mysteries. Because they're all about Jesus. I mean, how can you argue against that? Now, some people of a traditional bent, get all bent out of shape because John Paul gave us 5 new mysteries. Look, the rosary wasn't sent down from heaven, okay? And as a matter of fact, I've always wondered why the rosary doesn't include the Immaculate Conception, you know, or Mary's Assumption. So as a mystery. So, there may still need to be work done to the rosary. Like, this is not a competition, like there's a proper list of prayers we have to say. And if we go beyond that, or, whatever, that something's wrong. Somebody's committed a sin, or sacrilege against tradition. No. Okay. John Paul was the reigning pope. He can add or take away from the mysteries as he sees fit. And he gave us those, and that's fine. Okay. And all of them are dealing with 5 instances in Jesus's life about the gospel. So you can't go wrong. All right. So, my opinion, nothing wrong with it at all. I had a neighbor who was exonerated through DNA evidence after 40 years in prison. Oh my gosh. Oh my. You see, this is why I raised the issue. Okay. So she's one of the 250. I think it's up to 253 now. But yeah. What I'd like to know is how old she was when they let her out, and did they compensate her? Because here she is without work, without friends, without family, probably. Everybody's deserted her. And now she's on her own with what skills, with what support. So they better have compensated her. And I'm talking about them in the millions for what this lady went through. My goodness gracious. Oh, it's a neighbor. I'm just assuming it was a lady for some reason. Um, Luna, if you can write back, let us know what was done for her to make up for this absolute tragedy that was cast upon her by the judicial system. So, folks, proof in the pudding right there. My St. Joseph Missal delineates shorter forms of the scripture readings. Do you know how these skipped verses were decided? The past Sunday, they missed key verses on the doctrine of creation. No, Ed, I don't know how they decide them. Sometimes you can tell how it's decided because when you look at the excluded verses, and they're not actually excluded, they're put in brackets. So they give you a choice whether you want to read these verses or not, but they're not required for the liturgy at that point in time. And I've been to several churches where they do read those extra scripture verses that are in brackets. But you can tell that why they do it, because if you read the details inside the brackets, it's not going to add a whole lot to the story that you don't already know from the beginning and the ending. So it's not necessary to read the intricacies of the plot, so to speak, in order to know what the moral lesson is of this passage. Okay. That's usually why they do it. Okay. And that's as far as I'm going to go on that. And like I said, you can usually tell that from the things that have been extracted. Gavin says a shocking number of people on juries don't care about the outcome, just go along without investigating. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me a bit. I mean, it's always been a joke, hasn't it? That, oh gosh, I have jury duty. My whole life's going to be turned upside down because I have jury duty. I mean, I'm just appalled at that kind of attitude. If I got called for jury duty, I got called once, but I wasn't selected, and I hardly got a chance to be selected because there were so many people there. But I would consider it an honor to serve on a jury and to see how the U.S. justice system works firsthand. I mean, how often do you get that opportunity? I mean, to me, it's just an honor I would just love to have. And but yeah, I have talked to people about this, and they just don't care. It's a waste of their time. They would much rather be out golfing. You get all kinds of attitudes. And I just am amazed at that. All right. Okay, so they skipped verses 11:3 to 7. Well, that talks about Abel and Noah. And I could see that. I mean, if I had to give them a rationale, I would say the whole chapter of Hebrews 11 is talking about the faith of so and so, the faith of this guy, the faith of that guy. Okay. So it first talks about, having faith in the fact that God created the universe. And then it says, and then the faith of Abel, then the faith of Noah, and then the faith of Abraham, and then the faith of so and so and so and so, all the way to the end of the chapter. Okay. And he's like giving the whole communion of saints from the Old Testament, so to speak. And he's telling the Christians of that day, follow these people. Look what they went through. And they still believed in the end. Okay. So that's what God wants you to do. It's going to look like everything's turned upside down. Just hang on to the end. Still, nothing's changed with God. Everything's still the same. Just hang on to the end and believe in Him, and you will be rewarded. So you don't need to say that over and over again. I mean, I wouldn't mind hearing about Abel and Noah and their faith. But if I hear about Abraham's faith, that's, I have an example of someone who went through hell and still believed. Okay, just like Abel and Noah did. So I can see why they would cut that out. Now, Psalm 33:60, I don't know. I'm not going to go there right now, but I think the example I gave you from Hebrews is enough. Okay, Curious Catholic says, many of the Eastern saints that are venerated by the Uniates, such as Saint Gregory of Palamas and Mark of Ephesus, etc., were condemned by the Roman Church. What does this say about the Uniates? I don't know all the ins and outs of that, Curious Catholic. It may be just because, they were in schism, and so the Catholic Church isn't going to accept any of their saints. Okay. Because in the Catholic Church, when you accept someone as a saint, that means they can be prayed to for spiritual favors. Okay. And if they're not sure Gregory is in heaven, not that he wouldn't be, okay, I'm just saying if they legally or canonically cannot say Gregory's in heaven, but practically they could say he's in heaven. You can't go by the practical, you can only go by the canonical, the legal. And so if he's not legally designated to be in heaven, then you can't pray to him for spiritual favors. And so he would be ousted, as well as anybody else from the other branches of the church, so to speak. Okay. All right. Now, as far as the Uniates are, I have to do some research on that. I don't know offhand, where they stand canonically, but I'm just giving you what the scenario would be if they weren't canonically within the Roman Catholic Church. Renee Calusia. Thank you so much for teaching us that we are one beautiful family on a non-rotating Earth in the center of all the universe. My pleasure there, Renee. All right, question from Flip Stigman. What can I refer to show that canonizations aren't infallible? I know liberal Catholics who've made infallible all John Paul's actions and words. It's annoying. Oh, yeah, there's a cult of John Paul II, that is for sure. Well, look, go to all the primary sources. The Catholic Encyclopedia would be the first place to start. And look what it says about canonizations. I'm not sure exactly what title you would look under. Saints, canonizations, something of that sort. but you will not find one statement in there that canonizations have ever been made infallible. Okay. I made a diligent study of that because this question bothered me to no end. And and I think most reasonable people will agree the church has never. The only ones that say that it is are those who try to use the ordinary magisterium argument. That as well, it's always been understood as being infallible by the ordinary magisterium, and therefore it becomes infallible ipso facto. Not really. Okay. I mean, ordinarily that would be a good argument, but when an instance comes up where you question it, then the ordinary magisterium has to give way to the fact that this has to be a dogmatic declaration of the church and not just something from the ordinary magisterium. Okay. Because you're going to have to prove, if it's the ordinary magisterium, you're going to have to prove that there was never a question about whether canonizations were infallible. And I doubt very much if you can prove that. Okay. If there's just one or two instances where the church has discussed this issue of whether canonizations are infallible, then that knocks out the ordinary magisterium. Okay. That cannot be used as a basis. So, of course, the question has come up because of some of the actions that John Paul II has done, and Paul VI especially. Okay, how these two were ever deemed saints to me is a mystery. Okay, all right, so let's go on. We've got 7 minutes left. When will relevant radio cease to become relevant? I don't know. Why don't you pose that question in your next question and answer session to them? I'm rather oblivious to what happens at relevant radio. I don't listen to relevant radio. I just hear hearsay about relevant radio, and that's as far as I want to take it. So, Zig Liu says, Fatima's miracle of the sun. Someone connected it with very strong sun's CME or even micronova. That would create havoc, knock out electricity on Earth. In your opinion, is it possible? Well, I think the first way to attack that question is to understand that it was a miracle. Okay. I mean, you don't want to go the route where you say, well, the heat from the sun dried up the water from the mud and everything and dried up the wetness from their clothing like it was a natural occurrence. Okay. That's not going to happen. That if the sun can work that fast, then it's going to have some super intensity to it. And the super intensity is going to be damaging to the human body. Okay. We can just take enough of the photon emission from the sun as it is, much less having it accelerated to the point where clothes dry within seconds and the mud dries to hard earth in a few seconds. Okay. So a miracle is happening. Okay. And that for the fact that the sun's dancing in the sky for 8 minutes. Okay. Yeah, there's some miracles going on here. So this is not an ordinary day where you can expect ordinary things from the sun. Okay. God may use the sun, but he can miraculously direct that light to be of a certain wavelength or whatever he wants to do. in order to get the job done. That's certainly possible. But of course, that's still a miracle because you're taking the natural operation of the sun and making it do something that's not natural. Okay. And that is by the fact that you've speeded up the process. Okay. All right. Um, Question: are we the last church in the book of Revelation? I'm speaking about the Laodicean church. No, that would not be us. Um, each of those churches, it's like we talked about with personalities tonight earlier. Each of those churches represent something that can go wrong in our present church. Each of the seven churches has a distinct problem. Okay. And the Laodiceans are like the lazy people. And that can happen. Okay. They lose their fervor and become lackadaisical about their faith. That can happen, but it can happen to a lot of churches. Okay. So these churches, they're not chronologically set where um, the last church represents the last church it's going to be in our history, nor are they set so that we're just going to be characteristic of one of those churches. We're going to have characteristics of all of those churches. Okay, even the two faithful ones, because there were seven, five of them were laxing, and two of them were faithful in the face of persecution. We're going to have that in our church too. Okay. So basically, Jesus is giving us a panoramic look at what the church is going to be like throughout history. Okay. All right. We got a couple more minutes. Looks like this might be our last question. Robert's question: why is Matthew 24 included in end time scenarios when it's blatantly obvious that our Lord Jesus is talking about the temple that they were looking at? Well, Mr. T, what I would suggest you do, we do have a book that I just published called Commentary on Mark, Matthew, and John. Okay. Now, in there, I explain that yes, Jesus is talking about the temple. Okay. But he intermittently speaks about the eschaton and then goes right back to talking about the temple. Okay. So, like in Matthew 24 or Mark 13 or Luke 21, you're going to get this sort of in and out throughout the storyline where Jesus is speaking about Israel at that time, and then he switches to the eschaton, and then he goes right back to speaking about Israel, and then he goes right back to the eschaton. Okay. And I make those demarcations for you so that you can know when Jesus is switching from one to the other and back to the other again. Okay. And I do that for Matthew, I do it for Mark, and I do it for Luke. So, and once you see that, once you see those demarcations, you're going to say, oh, okay, now I can put it all together. So Jesus is actually talking about both, okay, but he's using the temple area and the temple time as sort of the backbone. And then he jumps off of that to talk about the end of time. And so then he goes back to the backbone again so that he can jump off of it again and talk about the end of time also. And it's very interesting how it's all put together. So I suggest you go to the website, robertsongenis.org, get the commentary on Mark, Matthew, and John, and you'll see what I mean. Okay. All right. So that is the last question for the night, and that means we're coming to the end, of course, and we'll be here next week. What will be the date? That will be August blah 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 23rd. And look forward to seeing you then. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question tonight, but don't let that stop you from coming back next week. And we'll see if we can catch you next week. Until then, may God bless you all and give you a happy week and bring you much closer to Him than you were before you came to this program. That's what our purpose is, to bring you closer to the Lord. And as we talked about earlier, make sure that you have a good dose of the fear of the Lord. That will keep you away from sin and keep you on the straight and narrow, guaranteed. Okay, God bless you all. And take care. We'll see you next week. And don't forget to stop by robertsongenis.org. And if you would love to, we would love it also. Give a small donation to us to help us keep going.